In 1900, at the Greater America Exposition in Omaha, the Oglala Lakota leader named Iron Hawk leaves the reservation and travels to show that his people are not museum pieces. While the country rushes into the 20th century, he talks about broken treaties, warriors, and young people trying to find their place in a country that was once theirs and still carries scars. In Montana, around 1908, Chief Lewison of the Flathead tribe faces a country laying down roads and train tracks where there used to be only indigenous trails. His steady face shows someone who negotiates with federal agents, protects his people, and tries to save their language, game, and ceremonies while the Old West turns into a distant memory. At the end of the 19th century, Spotted Eagle, an Itazipcho Lakota leader, finds himself between the world of the buffalo and the world of barbed wire fences. In 1880, while old hunts turn into stories told by the fire, he carries in his eyes lost battles, forced agreements, and a stubborn will to keep his people's pride alive, despite everything. In Canyon de Chelly, Arizona, a Navajo woman sits in front of the loom and pulls the sheep's wool thread like someone sorting through memories. Each rug she makes carries a design learned from her mother and grandmother at the beginning of the 20th century, while the country changes fast outside and the silence of the earthen house holds another story upright for a little longer. A young Ute woman coming from the mountains faces the future at a time when the government was pushing her people away from the hunting routes. The dark fringed dress tells of a culture adapting what came from the white people, but trying to hold on to the language and customs inherited from the ancestors while the frontier was changing around her. American Horse and Red Cloud appear side by side with Officer Frank North at a moment when enemies were trying to negotiate space in the same landscape. One had fought against the United States, the other guided troops, all of them caught in the same game of land taken, fragile agreements and broken promises that were changing the face of the plains. Bird Wild Hog, a northern Cheyenne, grew up hearing about the 1879 escape when his people tried to leave the reservation by force. Years later, he became an Army scout, walking between the native camp and the fort. Every mark on his face shows the price of living divided between those two loyalties on a border decided in Washington. A warrior of the Crow Nation holds the rifle as a work tool, not a trophy. For him, hunting buffalo and elk meant meat, hides, and respect. On the Montana plains, the sound of the shot mixed with the horse's hooves, while fences and railroad tracks cut across the path of the hunting herds and squeezed the tribe's space. Kez-Ka-Yo, nicknamed Bob Small or Bob Tail, leaves the Cree lands and heads south for work and safety, crossing a border that had barely existed for his people before. In 1906, in Butte, Montana, he was already wearing clothes in the white style, but kept in his eyes the memory of his people while F.E. Piso recorded the scene. On the banks of the Little Bighorn, near Billings, a man from the Crow Nation gets ready for a tribal gathering. It's the early 20th century, and as he straightens his clothes and remembers his ancestors, the Crow Fair brings together clans, war stories, and alliances. The smell of dust, leather, and horses marks an indigenous territory that's still alive. Cayatadi, a Laguna woman in Laguna, Pueblo, New Mexico, carried a name full of history, but in white people's paperwork, she appeared as Loti or Lota Atsi. In 1904, she lived in a village cut through by the railroad, where priest, teacher, and government agent tried to fit her people into a country that was changing fast without asking anyone's opinion. Mato Witkotko, from the Yankton Dakota people, carried one of those names that say it all. Some translated it as Brown Bear, others as Crazy Bear. In 1872, Alexander Gardner recorded his image, years after covering the Civil War, at a time when Native leaders were still trying to negotiate space in a West that was shrinking. Out on the prairie, a group of Native people gathers around a newly arrived car, a noisy machine brought by the settlers. For many people there, that oil-smelling engine seemed like something from another world. The meeting between steel wheels and old horseback trails showed that the frontier was changing for good. At the end of the 19th century, in a Lakota hunting ground, the horizon line was filled with cone-shaped teepees raised with poles and canvas. Early in the morning, you could see smoke coming out of the openings at the top, children running between the lodges and horses tied beside them, ready to follow the herd when the buffalo changed direction. Around 1920, a Kiowa woman stands on the Great Plains, wearing decorated leather clothing, a belt with designs, beads hanging across her chest, and a scarf tied firmly around her head. Every detail shows the pride of her people and the desire to keep the tribe's history alive, even as the government tightens the squeeze in those hard decades. Around 1880, Sitting Bull faces life as a Hunkpapa Lakota chief who has already seen a lot change on the plains. His simple clothes and serious manner show a man who did not bow to the orders from Washington, while the photographer David Francis Barry records a face he knows is part of the great turning point of the West. At the beginning of the 20th century, on Crow Reservation land in Montana, a craftsman crouches beside a leather teepee and gets his brushes ready. He dips the tips into paints made from plants and minerals and starts marking the canvas with shapes he learned from the elders, showing that even everyday work carries memory and respect for where you come from. In 1870, a young woman from the Iroquois Confederacy sits to have her portrait taken by Richard Throssell, an artist of Cree origin connected to the Crow people. Her gaze is not an empty pose. It carries the weight of generations who lived among forests and lakes, reminding us that that region already had a long history before the maps of the United States. In 1877, Garnet of the Oglala Lakota Nation faces Charles Milton Bell's studio as if he were standing before a council of warriors. The feather headdress, the beaded necklace, the fur coat, and the sacred pipe are not just decoration, but signs of his position, duty, and his connection to the old way of life on the plains. On the Great Plains in the center of the United States, a Pawnee warrior named Lusaku had a name tied to the sunrise, a sign of strength for his people. In 1869, he went to Omaha and posed for the Jackson brothers, guys who were recording the frontier while the country was still healing from the Civil War, trying to preserve that memory. In 1889, in the dry, harsh Southwest, a young Apache woman faces D.B. Chase's lens. As she holds her gaze, the federal government tightens the noose, pushing her people away from their old mountains and rivers. Every line in her face shows the resistance of someone who refuses to disappear from her own land, even under constant threat. At the end of the 19th century, more than 500 Native leaders arrive in Omaha for the United States Indian Congress. Among them is American Horse, a Sioux chief. There, in the middle of the Trans-Mississippi Exposition, The government displays the tribes as an attraction while pushing those nations onto smaller reservations on the map, far from their original lands. Among the Cheyenne, the Dog Soldiers Society took care of order and defense, answering to a council of 44 chiefs that was renewed from time to time. Tradition says they were born when sweet medicine came out of a cave in the Black Hills, carrying 4 sacred arrows to guide the people and protect the land from invaders. In 1879 in Arizona, 2 young Hopi women pose in front of an adobe wall, wearing simple dresses, necklaces, and worked silver. Behind the scene, government expeditions cross the desert to study these peoples, trying to record every custom before the pressure of the frontier and the new towns wipes everything out for good.